Welcome, my name's David Edgar and you're joining us for the second episode of what I'm sure is going to become the landmark series Scot's Thoughts. That means, of course, that the prodigal son has returned to Heart and Hand Towers. It's Mr. Scot van den Akker.
Hello. I'm probably doing this because David wanted to know some of my thoughts, or because it's International Week. It's one of the two.
No, it is. It's a bit of both. And I think, first of all, Scott, you should maybe take some time to explain to your previously adoring listeners that, contrary to popular rumour, I didn't fire you, and nor did you flounce off in a huff after I ate the last fairy cake when we were out for tea. That it's all perfectly amicable, and you will still be contributing clearly to the Heart and Hand family as we move forward. So if you just want to share your thoughts with the punters at large and just sort of explain why you're doing your whole kind of Greta Garbo thing at the moment.
Right, folks. Yes, why did I flounce off and then return? Basically, I've been taking stock of a lot of things recently, thinking about the stuff that I do, and thinking about the pod, which, by the way, is going from strength to strength. And David and I have talked about a lot of the plans he's got for the future for 2018, and it's incredible. But I was finding it harder and harder to get my personal mojo going for it. I think David and I have been doing this in different formats for years, and I've been doing it for about 20 years, trying to get the club to change its ways, talking to people, leafleting, then online, and now the pod. And I suppose you think there's only so long you can give the same message to people and say the same sort of things. I think everybody who's listened to the pod for 7 years knows what I think about how the club should be run and the mistakes we've made. And I think it needed a new voice to say something different. Secondly, David actually got the people to do that. There's been superb additions to the cast recently, so I felt I could. Thirdly, David and I created this at a time when jokes and laughter was thin on the ground. We have stabilised. We're in the SPL, which is hardly exciting, but it's not that depth of despair when we were trying to make knob gags out of almost going out of business. And I feel that we are stable, and David and I were basically, if you like, joined at the hip in a mission to try and laugh through the tears. And I feel that those tears are a bit less pressing at the moment. I think the club is in safer ground. And fourthly, I wanted to see what else I could do in David's empire, media empire. And David's has loads of ideas about more random pods like Scot's Thoughts. And it sounded really, really interesting. So that's basically a summary. It's sort of a mixture of personal, a mixture of boring myself by droning on about how shit the club's run, and hoping that the new guys get a chance to expand the pod. I've not got enough time and energy and passion at the moment to give it what it should, because it's so important to me. So I'm going to help in a way I can. Like a French soldier in World War II, I'm going to take myself out the firing line.
I would like to point out that when I suggested, we could do other shows and stuff that you're interested in, like today, I meant on top of everything else. But okay, fine. You're far too lazy and work shy, Josh Windass. So here we are to discuss. Now, we came up with the title of the pod. Tell them what your original idea for a name was, genuinely.
The original idea was Scott Talks Football from Around the Globe, with David asking additional questions as we go along.
Catchy.
Informative.
Well, yeah, no one could claim that they weren't being told what they were going to be listening to, and that's exactly the case today, where Scott came to me and he said, look, there's something important happening in world football, something that has got my juices flowing, as it were, and I'd like to come on and talk about it. And I said, well, YouTube exclusive, so why not? And Scott, tell the punters the reason that you wanted to come and come in their ears this evening.
It's the excitement, the unbridled joy of the Asian Champions League Final.
Now, all joking aside, this is not a subject I know an awful lot about. So, in terms of the Asian Champions League, it's growing in stature, obviously, every year. What sort of crowds does it attract? I mean, is it a big thing in Asia at the moment, or is it finding a niche, or has it not? What stage is it at in its development?
I think it is probably bigger than most of the domestic leagues. Obviously, it's the same as you get in Europe and South America, where domestic football was probably still equally as important in Japan perhaps Korea, but in some of the countries, certainly in the Arab, sort of the Gulf states, and maybe even Australia, it really catches the imagination. And West Sydney Wanderers won it a few years back, and that was very rare. They were quite a new club, and it was a huge thing for them, and they're sold out every Champions League game. So it's a big deal, but also it's a home and away basis, so it's probably more like the
old European Cup.
Yeah, it's like the Libertadores, much more. Even the final, it's all home and away.
Right.
And so you don't have a set piece final like in a neutral venue. So the final itself is really exciting for that reason, but they don't really have the concept of travel in the same way.
In terms of fans,
so probably, yeah. I mean, the distances are so vast.
Yeah, of course. And not really rich countries. A lot of them, obviously, things like Japan and Australia, but a lot of the Middle East countries, maybe the kind of average fans don't have that sort of spending power to follow a team.
It's the culture as well, I suppose. Like in places like Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, I don't think they would really go with the lads to Tokyo for football weekend
to get a few beers. No, I can see some difficulties there. Are there any particular nations at the moment who dominate it, or is it still, much as the original kind of European Cup was, that you never really knew who anyone could come through that had entered it, basically?
Yes, it's more like the Libertadores again, in that it's much more open. This year's finalists, which we'll come on to, haven't won it. Between them, they've won it 3 times, but not recently.
Right.
And generally, the Korean clubs are the strongest. That's a kind of rule of thumb. If you're looking at the last 8, there'll be Korean clubs in there. The Australians have had a mixed bag. The Australian clubs can go from, as I say, West Sydney Wanderers winning it, through to getting pumped out in the group stage. Japan's always strong, and there's always 1 or 2 clubs come through from the Middle Eastern area, as there is this year from Saudi Arabia. There's a finalist, and there's always one comes through from that half of the draw. To give you an example of the financial and the logistic issues, early on in the group stages, it's done regionally. So
makes sense.
You wouldn't get a team from Oman, playing in Sydney, Australia, and then they bring it together for the latter knockouts. So that it's not as wealthy and as well sponsored, as obviously as the Champions League, the European one, but it's important because it is more open. You don't know who's going to win it when it starts, and teams can have like Western Sydney Wanderers, and teams can have a run at it, which captures the public's attention. Like our Champions League and like the Libertadores, you don't have to have won your league to be in it.
Oh, right, okay.
So there's a few clubs from each country go in. Again, I suppose like the Champions League, it's to reward the TV audiences and the money. So you'll get a good few clubs from China, Japan, South Korea, even the ones that haven't won the league. China's the odd one. China, obviously.
I was going to ask about China, mate, because obviously, although it seems to have slowed down recently, there was some outrageous spending to try and catch up. So, I mean, how are their teams doing at this level? Has the league significantly strengthened and it's reflected in this, or is it not yet translated into success in that area?
But yes, it has done. Not this year, strangely enough. There was no Chinese clubs in the semi-finals, but they have managed to. Recently, they had Luis Felipe Scolari and his team Shanghai. They won it. Evergrande, who are they're sponsored by estate agents, huge estate agent in China, which you wouldn't think would be a thing because all property is state owned apparently. So Evergrande, they've won it, but this year they didn't have such a good run, and I guess that's the exciting thing again. I mean, in our Champions League, you're going to get the same sort of, you know who's going to be in the last 16, in the last 8. You don't in the same way. And I'm going to do a Libertadores feature hopefully next week. And again, you'll see that it's different names and it's different traditions, different types of football. And I think that's important. I think it's something that European Champions League could look at, because it's all about money in the European Champions League. But I'm not convinced that there's enough opportunity to break through, apart from maybe you could say Atletico Madrid recently, but there's not that anything can happen, which you still get in Asia and South America, which I think makes it interesting. Also harder to predict, harder for the bookies.
Of course.
And there's no odds out yet. There's no actual. I checked for tonight, so I'm going to update the listeners. but the bookies aren't opened their book yet on the final. But it'll be interesting to see who they put. And I'll give my own tip, and we'll go through probably reasons why. But it's more open. It's not one of these things where, it'll be Real Madrid or, Bayern Munich, and that's what people say in August.
Yeah,
it's still unknown.
Yeah, and you can pretty much nail 3 of the 4 semi-finalists in the European Champions League in August, and generally you'll be right. Certainly the last few seasons,
and that makes it harder as well for people to have a flutter, and it's harder for the excitement to build. Whereas I think there's still an unknown, but it's also harder to get odds. As I say, I was looking through for the odds, and a lot of the books aren't open, and a lot of it's specialist Asian betting.
I've got to ask then, when you're mentioning betting, I'm sure that some of our listeners may be putting on their cynical hat, say, is it on the up and up? Because obviously we've heard so much over the years about Asian betting syndicates and their attempts to influence the game. And it would be, I think, a little bit naive to pretend that it hasn't happened in the past. But is it something that is noticeably tainting the competition? There are some results where you just think, no way. Or does it appear to be on the level?
It does appear to be on the level. I think a lot of if you look at it, a lot of the Asian betting syndicates are looking for poor leagues, very, very, very poor leagues. And what they seem to go for is the Champions League in Europe and the Europa League, the qualifying rounds. Because obviously there's money to be made just for appearing. So a lot of absolutely no-hoper clubs are going to go, and they're going to be open to persuasion from betting syndicates. I think in Asia it's different. I think, the betting fever there is open. Like if you're in China or Korea, betting's a national pastime, and I don't think there's clandestine, but I don't think they interfere as much in that. It could happen at the lower levels. I know in certain places like Singapore and the Malaysian leagues they've had big trouble with match fixing and match rigging. But there's no evidence yet with Japan, Australia, China, Korea that any of that goes on. And in the Gulf states, I think you'd be beheaded.
Yeah, it's
probably
not,
if you tried.
Yeah, it's not something that I think I would try, especially if it was a club that was owned by the state or by a prince or whatever. It's probably not something to go for. So tell us a little bit about this year's final then, mate.
Well, this year's final pits the giants, one of the giants of Saudi football, Al-Hilal from Riyadh.
Yes, well-known name, yeah.
Yeah, and they last won it in the year 2000.
Wow.
And yes, it's not. That's the thing that can happen. New names. They won it in 1991 before that. And they were beaten in 2014 in the final by Western Sydney Wanderers. And a big shock, that was the Australian team. So they've been 3 finals in 25 years. And they've won 2 of them. They're a founder member of the Saudi Pro League. I think they're one of only 4 teams who have always been in the Saudi Pro League. It's not as impressive because I think it only started in the early 60s. But, still, they're a traditional club. The problem, as you've seen, I'm sure you've seen the TV pictures of places like United Arab Emirates and the crowds. It's hard. Football's not a thing that is ingrained yet, and families don't go and women don't go. But they get about 8,500 to 9,000 average, and their stadium holds about 46,000. So their league games may seem to be rattling about, but then if you look at an SPL team, if they get 9,000 average, they'd be happy.
Yeah.
So they're not a huge team, but by Saudi terms, they are. I think 9,000 is considered a very decent crowd. They have, as I say, the recent history is checkered. 2014, they were expected to romp, and I think that they're still a bit disappointed about that. Their best 2 foreigners who may be known to anyone who knew anything, they've got Mario Britos, who won 2 Mexican titles with Leon, but winning Mexican titles has got a whole new meaning now for us.
Yes.
And I don't know how much stock we put in them anymore.
It's difficult, yes. Although I did notice that when you're talking about countries that traditionally done well, Qatar wasn't mentioned.
No, especially the 5th place team in Qatar.
No, not so much.
They tend not to rise to the top, no. So he's Uruguayan, but he's now Mexican through residency. But he then left Mexico, of course. He left Leon and went to Al-Hilal. Carlos Eduardo, and he's slightly famous because he started with Porto, he went to Nice, and he scored 5 goals in 1 league game a couple of seasons ago against Gangle, the brilliantly named Gangle. He scored 5 goals in a 6-1 win, and people thought he was going to be the real deal, but he stopped getting the game for Nice. They changed the manager, the usual. So he pitched in Saudi, and their top scorer on Star is Omar Karibarine, who's their home-based he is a Gulf player. He scored 5 goals in the semi-final over the 2 legs. So he's one to watch, Omar Karibarine. I think they expect him to score any goals they're going to score. Their advantages in the final, if you're going to look at advantages, they're unbeaten so far in the tournament. There are quite a lot of draws, but they are unbeaten. They can score, like in the semi-final against Persepolis of Iran, they got a man sent off early and gave away a penalty, and they were very ruthless. They destroyed them as a result. They can go for the jugular when they need to. Not particularly high scoring, but they do draw a lot of games, which could be good in a 2-legged affair. They're also raging after 2014, and they've got a lot of local regional rivalries with teams who they're very glad aren't in the final this year. So they're the top dogs from, if you like, that half the draw, and they are playing Urawa Red Diamonds from Saitama in Japan. Now, they're owned by Mitsubishi.
Oh, right, okay.
And they started life as Mitsubishi FC. They were a works team. And again, they were founder members of the league, which is interesting for both clubs. There's 5 clubs started the league, and only 4 remain. The other one's in about Division 8. So they're a founder member of the Japanese league before it was a J League, but they changed their name because I think they had some law about not actually being able to be called after your main sponsor. Anyway, so they're Urawa Red Diamonds. They've also got a history of trying to make strips that are very like Man United strips. I think to try and get fans to buy replica. They're not exactly twinned with them, but they always have a home top, which is not unlike that year's current Man U top.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. They've only won it once in their only final, 2007. They appeared in the final for the only time, and they managed to win the game, which is pretty good odds, I think you'll agree. They managed to beat Sepahan of Iran in the final. See, that's the thing, an Iranian team in the final. So you see the trend already. There's Korean teams have won it, Chinese team has won it twice recently. It is different names are coming up in the trophy. So they've won it once, and that was 10 years ago. Their average attendance, being Japan's a bit higher, it's more of a football country. They get about 37,000 people at league games, and the stadium holds 62,000. So again, there are empty spaces. But for big games, derby matches, which is all of them, because almost every team is round Tokyo, and Saitama's quite close to Tokyo Bay as well. So they do fill it, and they sold it out for the semi-final as well. They actually beat one of the favourites, Shanghai SIGP,
yes,
who are a very well-backed team.
Very wealthy club.
Very rich, and they beat them 2-1 on aggregate to reach the final. They're the high scorers so far, if you include the group stages, and they've scored in every game. So that kind of is interesting for the final. You have Al-Hilal, who haven't lost a game, and you've got Urawa Red Diamonds, who've scored the most goals, including scoring in every game they've played in. So that's the thing. Their most known players, I suppose, Rafael Silva is a Brazilian who made his name in Lugano in Switzerland, then moved to Japan. And Zlatan Ljubijašković is Slovenian. He scored at 2010 World Cup for Slovenia, so he's a World Cup scorer. And he made his name in Ghent in Belgium, where he played almost 200 games, and he moved to Japan as well. The rest of them are all domestic-based players apart from that. So the first leg is in Riyadh, which is coming up on the 18th of November, and the second leg's in Saitama on the 25th of November. Both are sold out, of course, and I think Eurosport might be covering the final, but I'm going to Google both if you can watch it and when the book opens on bets. My tip, personally, I think Urawa Red Diamonds are going to win it. I think they're going to win it 3-2 on aggregate with a home win and an away draw. That's my opinion. And I hope it's a good game. As I say, it's going to be different. I mean, I can scroll down the list of teams in the final, teams that have won it, and you've got teams like Adelaide United reached the final, Gamba Osaka, Sepahan, Hyundai Motors, Jeonbuk from Korea, and that's in the last few years. These are teams that reached the final. So it's like the Champions League used to be in the late 80s and early 90s, when you had Nantes and Panathinaikos and Monaco and Dynamo Kiev. It's that kind of era they're at now, before money strangles. And I think it's funny, you were saying earlier, I think if you fast forward 10 years from now, it will be Chinese and Japanese and maybe the odd Korean team in the final every year, if the money keeps going. But I'm glad at the moment it's not. And I think the Libertadores shows you as well, even then, because of basically financial misadventure and fuck-ups, you can actually get no domination, like Argentina and Brazil should dominate,
yes,
and especially, but they don't, because they always manage to somehow sell all the best players, go bankrupt, have a chairman that commits suicide, feed alcohol to a monkey. There's just, football's a way of self-destructing, and there's no way of saying that Chinese clubs will take over, but the moment it's still an open tournament that anybody can win, and I think football fans should be glad of that while it's still happening.
Okay, well, that sounds very interesting, and definitely something for people to check out on the 18th and the 25th, just to see if Scott's prediction comes true or not. Now, Scott, it would be remiss of me to have you on here and not ask you about Rangers' current managerial situation. So just before we finish up, just your current thoughts on, first of all, Pedro's dismissal, and then potential new managers and who you feel would be the right man for the job.
Okay, Scott's thoughts, part 73. First, Scott's thought is Murrayfield was great stadium, but I would close Hampden. I've changed my mind. Secondly, as related to Murrayfield, the atmosphere was fantastic, and although Pedro had a lot of sympathy from people and he was a popular man, I felt that at Murrayfield you could tell the tension had been lifted. This might seem strange, but I'm not saying spring in the step, but I think there was something going wrong, even for the folk that liked him and respected Pedro. It wasn't right.
No, we sort of knew in our heart of hearts it wasn't going to happen.
No, nice man, and everyone says,
yep,
lovely man. And in Murrayfield, nobody was happy, and I didn't hear a single person saying, basically F off Pedro and you're a shyster or a charlatan. That'll come though. But it was just generally a bit of relief. People were lighter that the change had been made. I think for a lot of people it was, the decision should probably be made earlier, perhaps after Progress. I think for me personally, we've talked about this in the pod, the idea that we'd went through at the end of last season and then Progress, but you'd suddenly get better. And you and I have talked about this for years in the pod, Ali McCoy, everything. There's an idea in football fans that a bit of bad luck, but suddenly it'll click and someone's getting a hammering, someone's getting beat 15-0. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's not going to click because it never is. And the board, I think, were a little bit late in pulling the trigger, but I think there's a bit of relief, a lot of relief from the fans I've spoken to that's been done. So from that point of view, nobody I know thinks he should have stayed. A few people agree with me that it should have been done sooner, but I think everyone is glad that the experiment is over. The next thing is what to do now. My view is not really controversial because there's quite a lot of it in Mark's website. I'd have probably gone caretaker, personally. I think this is a big... I'm not as hung up as other people about this so-called 10 in a row or the Invincibles, because I don't care what Celtic do. I never watch them. I don't give a shit. But we need to get this right. I think the fans are... There's a slight distance growing between the board and what they said when they came in and what's happening. Do you remember the era of openness, the fans as equal partners, marching together to a bright future? And I think the fans are still with them. The fans are still there. But there's a little bit of cynicism creeping in.
Yes.
And I think this has to be a good appointment. It has to be a right appointment. And I think it should have been made with Mark Allen in mind, with a director of football. We should have looked at the structure and how we wanted it to go ahead. Did we even want our manager, or did we want a first team coach? A big difference, you see, because then you don't need to worry so much about temperament or facing the cameras, or, like, for example, going to Mexico with £4.5 million and coming back with, like, did we want a coach perhaps, and the club could buy the players? And I think at the moment, if we make an appointment too quickly, you do maybe run the risk of making a few of the mistakes again. Is it a manager or is it a coach? Who's buying the players? How much of the season still to be salvaged? We've got to play Aberdeen twice, Hibs away and Celtic in the next 6 weeks. Is it a good time to appoint anyone? So I'd have probably gone caretaker until the club were really ready, had looked through the CVs, interviewed and thought about their direction. Too late, no one listens to me. No, you know. So I think they are going to appoint, and I think of the names that have been mentioned, they go from the ridiculous, like Sam Allardyce and maybe Moyes, who are still apparently wanting $2 million a year. You know, that was never going to happen.
And could get it. You know,
yes.
It's okay saying they want it, but, you know, Moyes has just proven they could get it. Allardyce could walk into a job tomorrow if he chose to.
Yeah, And I think there's still a lot of guys in our support, and again, we've talked about this. One of the best things and the worst things about our club is there's a sentimental streak a mile wide, which is like, everybody would take a pay cut to come to the famous Rangers. It's just that all it is a gap in their CV, but not everybody sees it that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. And
I think taking a pay cut to come to the SPL is not. We can't aim at that kind of manager. So what we had then was has-beens or up-and-coming managers who haven't made the break yet, like the David Wagner at Huddersfield type appointment, or the safe pair of hands. I think the club first, it seems from the names mentioned to me, that the first to go was the up-and-coming, the David Wagner type. I think they believe that Warburton and Pedro were in that group.
Yeah.
They've gone. They're not going to do that again. We're not getting a left field appointment. So that leaves people on their way down or safe pairs of hands. The people on the way down, I suppose you then have the people that might come. You've got like Kirbishley,
Pardew,
McLaren,
yeah,
and folk who maybe be looking for a way back into football, won't be too fussy. None of them are that exciting. None of them went, I don't know. The best thing about Kirbishley, of course, it would be like an episode of the Sweeney.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that's what we need at the club.
No, possibly not.
And that leaves safe pair of hands, and you know where I'm going with this, don't you?
I think I do, yes.
Derek McInnes. He's a Rangers supporter. He played for the club. He knows the SPL.
He knows the media.
They like him. People like him in the media, and he will do better than the last two. Now, will he do better than the last two? Of course, is a different question from, is he the man? Can he match us in our dreams? Can he take us to this where we want to be, promised land? And this is probably not the time to talk about that because he's not been appointed yet. But if we split it into will he be better than what we've just had, yes. Is he the man? I'm less sure about that.
So what you're saying is he might not be Mr. Right, but he could be Mr. Right now.
Yes, as George Michael once sang.
Yes.
I believe. I think the danger, of course, inherent in it is that he swaps us for Aberdeen. That all we do is swap places with him. We're second all the time and reach cup finals, but don't win any of them.
Yeah.
And they're third. And that's better than now, but that would leave more questions than it would answer and wouldn't really be a solution for the board or for anyone. So we'd have to see him pull some rabbits out the hat. If he gets the job, it can't be swapping positions with Aberdeen, and it got to be a lot of levels above that. But we don't know because he's not got the job. We don't know what he can do with a bigger budget and better players. I'm not going to be cynical about it in the slightest, but being a bit better than we are now is something that, to be honest, our current Murty could have done that.
Yeah, that's true.
There has to be a lot more to it than just being a little bit better and swapping places with Aberdeen. That is the next issue, is whether he would be the man for that. I suppose that's my opinion.
I suppose the counter argument is anyone who gets a promotion in work, and this technically, not technically, this would be an upward move. And it's if you left your company to go to a bigger one and have a bigger role, then I think there's an expectation that you will grow, that you will not just provide what you provided before, but you will actually develop as a manager or whatever role you've been hired to do. And I think that maybe that's the consideration. And as you say, McInnes is on the right age side of someone who could go on to have his best years. And I think that that's the counter argument to that. But nothing you said I would disagree with.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, it's a bit odd, isn't it?
It is. Usually this is the stage you call me an arse.
You are an arse, but not because of anything you said there.
Oh, just in general.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. No.
Before we come in here, folks, I don't want to start welling up with tears about missing the pod, but before we actually started recording, Dave and I were talking about fingering and organs, and it just although not in that context, but it took me right back. It just took me right back.
That's it. We have a special magic when it comes to talking about things being inserted into body parts. I don't think anyone does it better than us, mate.
No, except the actual insertion.
Oh, well, a lot of people probably do it better than us.
I would certainly hope so.
Yeah, longer, definitely.
Yes.
But you do what you can. Okay, well, I'd like to thank, first of all, our executive producer in London, Mr. Mike Lee and Miss Paul Miles, but I would especially like to thank Mr. Scott Van Den Akker for returning, and he will be back fairly regularly in this medium on Scott's Thoughts. So if you've been missing him, this is the place to come to. Come to the YouTube channel and tell your friends about it. Share the link. Just youtube.com Heart and Hand Podcast, and there will pop up loads of videos on there now and more week by week. So Scott, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Great to be back. And remember, everyone, if you want to know a bit about the Uzbek League or the Australian setup, any questions, then if I'm going to ramble about world football and events, then I'm happy to cover any questions, cover topics, dig a bit deeper, funny club names, who's the best team in Cyprus, why. Just anyone get any questions or any comments about global football, just get in touch. I might ignore you like David O does with people that get in touch with him.
Yes.
But you don't know. You just don't know.
No. And where can they get you?
They can get me at Scott Hearthand on the Twitter.
Right, they can indeed, and you can also get me and suggest some things for Scott because, as I say, he's got a very wide-ranging brief for this show, so he can do whatever he likes. And if you put an idea in his head, or you make him pregnant with a thought that might explode, then you could be hearing your topic discussed on here. You'll get me at Ibrox Rocks. My name's David Edgar. I will talk to you again on Friday with this week's it's a Q&A pod this week because we don't have a game. So get your questions in using the hashtag HHPod on Twitter, or go to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast on Facebook, and put your question in there. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.